I was upset, crying too much. Yes, I do cry a lot, and I had been crying a lot lately, but I could not stop this hysterical crying. My best friend William and I had started that day talking about how much we loved the new Mariah Carey song. We were excited that she was really singing again. No more slightly melodious whispering. I give my all to have. But we ended the conversation with the painful choice to spend the time away from each other. It seemed like 9 years was enough for him. I was sad and resistant and unwilling and unable to understand, so maybe that's why I was crying. But there seemed to be more to the story. I woke up the next morning, and again, of course, I was late for class. If my class were in Warner or Rice, I would have been there on time. But they just had to have the African American Women's Literature class way across campus in the administration building. I remember getting halfway across Tappan Square when those bells started chiming. Ding, 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 ding. Dominique's late. It was 9 o'clock. It was an emotional class, I think. It always was an emotional class. I remember our discussions always consisted of the Black women telling their difficult stories and the white women crying about it. I walked out of class with my friend Imani, and I guess we both had class in the same building together for the next period. I was a TA in Adenike's African dance class. I can't remember if Imani was in that class too, but we walked together. We were laughing and giggling about something, probably the class that we just had. But as we approached the building, Mrs. Greer Miller, Imani's mother, my former advisor, walked up to us. She said something like, "Something has happened, and I have to tell you about it." We were still sort of in giggle mode. A plane hit the World Trade Center. I was still a little giggly. I thought it was funny because during the summer, a man had accidentally ran a small plane into the Statue of Liberty, and my mother and I kind of laughed that off. It was kind of weird, but it turned out to be a prophetic accident, I guess. And another plane hit the other tower. The giggling stopped. "Basically, the World Trade Center is gone," she said. What? Mommy. All I could think about was Mommy under the rubble, riding on a train that went directly under the World Trade Center. She can't be dead. I need to call her. I went inside to use the phone in the office. The woman in the office said, "I'm sure the phones are down and everyone's calling. You may not be able to get through." I know, but I need to talk to Mommy. I have never not been able to get through to her, not in my 21 years. She was always there to answer the phone. I called home, and I called home, and I called home, but she wasn't at home. Maybe she didn't go to work. Why wouldn't she have gone to work? No answer. I went upstairs to class, and it was still kind of a blur, but I remember Adenike yelling at us and being upset with us, saying, "So many other countries deal with this sort of thing every day. Why are there are people who lived through World War I and World War II? Why are you all so upset?" So we went on with class. I went on to lead the warm-up. I stood in front of the class, bending and flexing my arms and crying. Bend and flex. I heard somebody say, "Are you okay?" Bend and flex. I don't know where my mother is. I was dazed. I just kept crying and bending and flexing my arms until the chair of the dance department came and forced Adenike to stop our class. I got dressed and I went over to the student union where everyone was gathered. I needed to find someone from New York. I needed to find William, who was the driving force, the one that set the stage for me, the one who influenced me and led me to be in Oberlin, Ohio, and not the East Village, attending NYU when the planes hit. But William and I had just decided the day before that we would not be as close as we had been. Would he even talk to me? But when I saw him, I didn't even care. I needed him. I couldn't find my mother. He couldn't find his family, who owned a store in Chinatown, which was very close to the World Trade Center. Maybe we just needed each other. For some reason, in the midst of all of this, I got excited because I remembered my computer had come. I got the slip in the mail. It was the one I ordered to replace the one that my sister and her partner bought for me, the same one that burned up in a massive car fire a few months earlier. Fire and loss. I felt stalked by the uncertainty of randomness. My sense of protection was gone, but in that exact moment, all I wanted was to save my computer, to bring my computer home. I asked my new friend to give me a ride home, and she wanted to help do anything she could to help New Yorkers, and in that moment, that's what I needed. But after that, I needed to be alone. The only voice I wanted to hear was my mother's. I went to my dorm room and called my mother over and over again. I called the training center where she was training for her new job in the Administration for Children's Services. I left a desperate message. I just want to know if my mother made it to work. If anybody can just call me back and let me know that my mother's okay. I called and called my sisters, who were both in Boston. I called them. They hadn't heard from her. We joked about security at Logan Airport. We talked about sociology. We talked about the fact that the terrorists must have really studied American culture. We talked about mommy and hoped that she was all right. We freaked out together on the phone, as we would do so many other times over the next few years. When my sister's partner died in 2003, when my grandmother died in 2004, when my other grandmother died in 2005, and when my father died in 2008. I called my grandmother in Pennsylvania. I wanted to make sure she was okay. I really knew she was okay. She didn't live in Shanksville. I asked if she had heard from my mother. I knew she hadn't heard from my mother. My mother would not have called her and not called me. And I felt bad for scaring my grandmother by telling her that my mother was missing. But I guess I just needed to feel mothered. I needed to connect. I wanted to feel connected to someone, I guess. After trying for hours, I turned on CNN and I laid down in my bed. I remember hearing some fool saying, if we didn't spend so much money on education and put it into the military, maybe stuff like this wouldn't happen. I remember realizing during this interview that there were actually regional accents. There was a distinct New York accent that I missed in that moment. There was a Boston accent and a Pennsylvania accent. I fell asleep with tears in my eyes like I did the night before, and I woke up and the sun had gone down, and I could hear helicopters in the air or military aircrafts. And I got up and I called home. Hello? You're alive. She told me the craziest story. She went to her training and had no clue what was going on. She was in the training room and heard screaming, but she thought maybe it was laughter or people playing around, and the guy who was doing her training ignored all the phone calls and pagers and screaming that he heard. But eventually, similar to my situation, someone came in and forced the trainer to stop and tell everyone what happened. Everyone went outside and they could see the smoke from where they were in Brooklyn. My mother who got mugged on the way to church and chased the mugger across the South Bronx to get her purse back. My mother decided that she was going to walk home to the Bronx from Brooklyn. She knew the city was about to shut down, and she didn't know how long it would be. She didn't want to get trapped in Brooklyn. She set off and approached the Brooklyn Bridge and was turned away by cops. She described people coming across the Brooklyn Bridge from Manhattan, covered in ash, walking like zombies. She still wanted to walk across, even after seeing that. She said, I needed to be home. I needed to be safe. I needed to talk to y'all. Eventually, she said the train started running again, and she got on the D train and went home. But it blew my mind that this city where I was from kept moving, even as all of this was going on. It never slept. It never slept even when it needed to sleep, even when the world was giving it permission to sleep. But my mother got home alive, so I'm grateful for the insomnia of my city. Now, 10 years later, so much has passed, so much has changed. William and I are still friends after almost 20 years, but it makes a difference when you're thousands of miles apart from each other. I went from being a college student in the Midwest struggling to figure out what it meant to be in her 20s to an ordained minister in the Midwest struggling to figure out what it means to be in my 30s. But even as I stand at another turning point in my life, trying to figure out how not to return to New York again, I still miss my city. I miss what it was. People forget that New York is actually a place where people live. We're not all characters. We are real, even though our main street is called Broadway. It's where I was born and raised and where I spent 25 of literally the most spiritually formative years of my life. And this huge community that is New York changed on that Tuesday morning. Yes, New York has always been a ball of energy and anxiety, so it seems like the heightened state of anxiety may have gone unnoticed. And I think it did for the most part. It's been overshadowed by the rhetoric about Ground Zero being sacred ground, about non-New Yorkers who protest Muslim community centers and probably go eat some halal food at a truck served by a Muslim person, by references to America in general, by Giuliani and Bloomberg pushing to make America know that we're okay and we're open for business. But no one looked back to make sure that the residents of this fake America were recovering from what they experienced. So the New York I returned to in 2002 was not the New York I left in 1998. People coped how they could. And as a result, the city is filled with so many people who feel like zombie-like, people who are unable to deal with anything. So many people just shut off, plug their ears with something, with music or whatever, put their heads down and just kept going where they were going, unable to be aware of the people who are next to them, seemingly unwilling to connect, just needing to get where they were going as fast as possible. And people may say, this is the way that New York's been forever. New Yorkers are just rude. We are rude. I'm not arguing with that. But there is something new, something symptomatic of something much larger. Culture can sometimes be born out of the unprocessed collective reaction to a tragedy. I think New York has created this sort of culture post 9/11. But my hope is that it's not too late to heal.